Hello. Welcome everybody. We bypassed the intro there and just went to apologize. That was basically all on me. So we, for whatever reason, it said we were streaming. It was not connecting to YouTube. Hate it when that happens. It's rare, but it does happen. I do think Vox. Is that no? All right. Perfect. So welcome to In Time. This time we managed to for. We're in time, not on time. Yeah, we pulled that one a little more than usual. I do apologize for that. My name is Soutter, and welcome. Thank you all for joining us. I have with me today Vox. Vox, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing good.
Well, and I do apologize for that. It's again, my bad. So let's see. We've got a couple of interesting things coming up. First and foremost, we are having Dr. Shook back on. He is a professor of philosophy, and he's going to be talking about meta-ethics, and that's one that we've been looking forward to for. Yeah, I know that's going to be a good one.
It's going to tell me all about how all my error theory is completely bunk and moral objectivism in a secular world is possible, and I'm going to laugh. No, I'm kidding.
You get a lot of that. You get there are a lot of people who are trying to I don't know why you really you do get a lot of oh, hold on a sec.
Hey, I can really hear you now.
Yeah, I think so it was a wrong microphone, so it was the boom that was up, but that's all right. I get like a number of people hit me up on the Discord and like, hey, you're a little soft, so got that squared away. And then yeah, your error theory, a lot of people just I don't know why it draws so much aggro, but it really does. You handle it beautifully, especially on the Discord, but wow. And then so we got one other announcement. Dr. Mowdy, doctor of goodonology, I guess is what he's not. There's no university would actually recognize him as having a PhD in basically anything, but he's a doctor here by our standards. Dr. Christopher Mowdy has now we've been on every Sunday we've been recording off time. And we haven't done any off time yet. I got to sit down and do some editing. It's a bit of a different kind of show. Looking forward to it. We've had some guests. Vox has been on. We've done a whole bunch of stuff. Nobody here has seen it yet. We're working on it, but we've been doing those on usually Sundays, 2 p.m. Now, for those of you who know anything about Mowdy, know that time has actually typically been reserved. He does his food prep time, and then on his channel, he does. He'll do hangs on his channel. People show up, and it's a lot of fun. He hasn't been doing those in a little while, and we've been kind of reaping the benefits. We'll do our hangs with him. But and this is the good news. He is getting back to producing at least a little more content on his channel. So. He's still going to be around. We're still going to see him. He's going to be central in off time. But what this also means is I'm going to be on his channel at I think it's 2 p.m. Sundays. I want to be on his channel. Link is in the bottom of the old one. I'll port all that information over, so the link will be down there. But so I hope you guys will check it out and see. It's just a casual hang. He makes food. Everybody has a good time. Sometimes we discuss really deep topics. Sometimes, crazy stuff happens. Sometimes it's just shooting the shit. So that's going to be his. I don't think that's going to be his good and all thing. It may be, but he's definitely the good and all is what it's the antidote to fuck it all. So he's it's going to be a good show. I'm going to have a lot of fun being there. I hope you guys will check it out. So now that we've done that, this show, ontology of gender, or what is gender, is something that we had Ozzy was our philosopher, and we'd have him on and we'd do a philosophy show once or twice a month on different topics. If you're interested in philosophy, we had these great conversations on epistemology. I think we did metaphysics. We did Hume's problem of induction, and just why is philosophy still important? It's a topic I really like. I know not a lot of people like it, but we have a whole host of good intro shows if you're interested in it. And then I had caught him on a Discord getting into an argument about gender, and it's a sensitive issue. And we had been sort of thinking on this show of doing a number of shows that were a little more going after the left a bit. We go after the right a lot. So we said, hey, let's. So we had some ideas for the Grievance Studies project and also. So we decided to do a series of shows, and it was going to end on ontology of gender. Now, Ozzy, for whatever reason, seems to think that nature is something special, and he likes to go backpacking, hiking, and apparently Vox has whatever illness that is. I don't know what it is. I think the TV is supposed to cure it. You sit in front of the TV
being a
for a while.
wasp.
Yeah, yes, well, I'm probably a wasp, but I don't know. Nature and I are not friends. But yeah, so he does camping, he does the whole 9 yards, and he goes for months at a time, and nobody can get a hold of him. That's where we've been. So we started doing the shows without him, but he had suggested as a foil for one of the shows that we contact Vox. So we contacted Vox, and Vox and I got along really well. And then all of a sudden now, here she has been doing a whole bunch of shows with us. So we have been really blessed that things worked out that way. It was really precipitous. Oh God, what? Fortuitous. I will go there, and it's been working out great. So we are sort of here on the final show of a very long series that we've been working on. What is gender? So Vox, I would love to hear. You have been taking this very seriously, and you have that whole whiteboard, and you've been diving into this. So Ozzy is not here. It's going to be a little different than we had originally envisioned it, but I think the amount that you have to talk about is really going to be well worth it. So I'm very glad we're doing it this way. And why don't you take it away?
Yeah, so there's going to be a couple things that are a little bit different than we had planned on because we had to switch over to the StreamYard's platform. We are not going to be able to have all the nice flashcards that I had prepared. And it is rather difficult to see the whiteboards with all the glaring stuff. So I'm going to do a lot more talking than I had planned on. So first, imagine this as almost a crash course on how to understand what gender is, how it's different from sex, where it's related to sex, and where people make mistakes in their thinking, and also how to respond to people who say things either well-intentioned or otherwise about gender and sex that just don't add up when we talk about these things in academic terms, but might actually add up when we talk about them in, our everyday kind of interactions with people. So basically, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be discussing ontology. Now, for those of you who don't know what ontology is a branch of metaphysics. It's a subset of metaphysics that deals with what is real. And generally speaking, ontology as a branch of metaphysics has been broken down historically into two primary categories: ontological materialism and ontological idealism. And think about this in ways of what is more real. Okay, so an ontological materialist is a person who's going to say the external world is the realist thing, and my perception of it, my thoughts of it, my ideas of it, my thinking of it are slightly less real. Where the idealist wants to say, my thoughts are the realist thing, and the external world is slightly less real or not real at all, unless we consider our perception to be real. So that's kind of what the philosophical understanding of ontology is. Now, there's two other ways to think about ontology. You can think of ontology as a branch of fields. So think of a taxonomist who determines, say, what parts of a system and how they relate to each other. So we label things. We call this Latin word, and then this subset of this is this Latin word, and their relation to this other subset. And then, of course, evolutionary biologist might take that and say, okay, well, then based on this, we predict that this would be in between this, and then we send out the archaeologists to go and look for that. And so that would be ontology as a branch of fields. And then finally, there is ontology as a branch of social understandings, which would be an attempt to describe society and its different parts and processes, as well as attempt to describe the underlying structures that affect individuals and groups. So we can think of ontology of society as understanding the way in which norms work and how we interact with norms and how they affect individuals and how they affect large groups. And it's this last branch, it's this last area of ontology that we're going to be focusing on today, which is going to be ontology as a branch of social understandings. And I think because we're going to be talking about gender, what's important to do first is talk about sex. So we're going to have a, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, and I wanted to interrupt you for a second. So what we can do, and I think what I'm going to do here is I can share my screen and get, so there you go. So this was actually, and I think I did the biological female. So what you wanted to show at this point was
Sex subsets.
or the ontology. Did you still want to do
No,
just so we okay.
Sex subsets.
Okay, so sex. Let's see, by ontology, gender.
Should say sex subsets 1.
Sex subsets 1. Right. Well, why don't you talk about it, and I will see if I can get that.
So basically, you will hear people talk about sex in a variety of different ways. And maybe you've heard somebody say to you before, there is only 2 sexes. And you thought to yourself, well, as a good progressive, I can agree to that, right? Well, depending on what they're saying, they might actually be accurate. If a person who's, say, doing a strict reductive understanding of mammalian sex, specifically tied to and only the action of reproduction, then yes, there are only 2 sexes. There is the sex that produces small gametes and the sex that produces large gametes. So the large gametes being ovum and the small gametes being sperm, right? And so we have female and male. And these are the 2 sexes, and this is what we produce. This is when we reproduce. So when we're playing, the game of reproduction, so to speak. And so this would exclude any person or animal that can't play the game of sex. So if a person says there's only 2 sexes, and all they mean by that is the capacity to produce a child, then in strictly biological sense, understanding what the word binary means in that specific regard, they would be correct. But generally speaking, that's not what biologists mean when they talk about sex, unless they, really hammer down that we're only talking about reproduction. And it's certainly not what we mean when we broadly talk about sex, because when we broadly talk about sex, we are talking about not only the capacity to reproduce, but all the physical characteristics that we perceive to be male or female. And we're also talking about the normative nature of sex. So if we break sex down a little bit further, you can see in the well, I'm not sure which one you've got up there. Yeah, but nope. Go back to the other one.
Okay.
That one. Nope. That's not it either. All right, so we're just not going to bother with the slides. It's all right. So when we talk about biological sex, we can talk about it as an understanding of 4 areas. So we'll talk about chromosomal sex, we'll talk about genetic sex, we'll talk about hormonal sex, and we'll talk about physical sex. And these are the 4 things that we need in order to say that this has a biological sex. So chromosomes obviously deal with the 23rd chromosome. So XX, XY, XXY, XXYY, X. And there are 6 common groupings of chromosomes found in humans. And I don't know, can we kind of zoom in here? I'll let y'all see this for a second. We have X, XX, XY, XY, XYY, and XXXY. And that makes up the common the majority of humans fall in 99.9% of humans will fall in that category. And that's a blueprint, right? Your chromosomes are blueprints. Think of a blueprint to build a house, right? You've got this map. You say this bit goes here and this bit goes there, and that's what your chromosomes are. So that's the first thing that we have. And then we have genetic sex. Now, genetic sex deals with a specific thing known as testes determining factor, right? And by the way, this is not an exhaustive understanding. This is basic scratch the surface level stuff, right? But we're going to talk now about testes determining factor. And this is also known as the SRY protein, right? And this is what tells human bodies to become male, right? So if you have a Y chromosome and the SRY gene turns on, it tells the body to form testes, which then eventually will produce testosterone and make you appear physically male. And then, of course, there's hormonal sex, which is something that would deal with the production and reception of sex hormones. And then there is physical sex. And physical sex is going to be dealing with the phenotype, genotype expressions as it relates to your physical appearance. Now, when you add all these things together and they all are working properly, you can produce what we would call bimodal distribution. Okay, so bimodally speaking, humans are generally male or female, right? And what we mean by that is that they have a physical sex that appears what we commonly understand to be female or male. They have a hormonal proper production and reception of sex hormones, estrogen, testosterone. Their genetic sex, the SRY gene, is properly activated or not, and chromosomes of XX and XY. Now, all of those combinations can go awry. You can have a XY chromosome male, but for some reason, the SRY gene doesn't turn on. Now, if the SRY gene doesn't turn on, it doesn't matter that you have XY chromosomes. You will come out of the womb physically female. If you are born with XX chromosomes, but for some reason an SRY gene pops onto an X, it doesn't matter that your chromosomes are female. You will be born out of the womb physically male. You could be born out of the womb physically male with XY chromosomes and SRY gene turn on, but suffer from androgen deficiency syndrome, which would mean that your body would appear and grow physically female. And all other kinds of combinations, right? So generally speaking, when we talk about sex as a whole, we would say that human sex is a broad spectrum with a strong bimodal distribution. Now, I know there was a lot of words in there, right? And if I confused the crap out of you, don't worry, because it confuses the crap out of me too, right? And the fact that it confuses the crap out of me and it confuses the crap out of you is enough to say that we can kind of drop this idea that sex is a binary anything, that there's only two sexes. And unless, of course, what they mean is reproduction, right? But again, nobody really means that. When someone comes up to a transgender person, per se, and says, there's only two sexes, well, they're talking about the entirety, right? They're talking about the whole. And in that instance, they are just wrong. There are many sexes. In fact, based on just some basic sixth grade mathematical calculations and the common stuff that can happen in humans, I calculated 216 distinct human sexes.
Jesus.
And that doesn't even include all the stuff that happens in the 0.1% of humans that have 25 other different sets of chromosomes. Now, granted, most of these people are sterile, right? A lot of them that are in that one group are sterile and they can't reproduce and things like that. But that doesn't mean that they are, not belonging of their own categories and things like that, right? So we should treat those people with respect. Now, I said all of that because I want to make it clear that when we're talking about sex, we are talking about descriptive claims, right? We are not talking about prescriptive claims. We are not saying anything normative in any way. We are not appealing to any values. We are not appealing to morality. We are not appealing to social guidelines. We are strictly appealing to science. Now, when we move to gender on the other side, now we're moving into philosophy.
Can I
So
ask
go ahead.
a question? Okay, so it sounds like actually the takeaway for me, the biggest that I'm hearing is that when we talk about sex, even just biologically, the answer to what is sex actually really still depends on context, because there is no one answer. You have to there's a context, and you have to be talking about a very specific. You have to have or you already actually have to have a position to have to be able to answer that question. You have to say, well, what is it you're looking for when you ask that question?
Absolutely. So for instance, if a person is only talking about physical sex, what the outside of our body looks like, well, there is so many different phenotypical and non-phenotypical expressions that humans have, right? So think about, and again, I want to preface this by saying there is nothing wrong with anybody's body in a normative sense, okay? So I just want to make that known going forward, because I'm going to say some things and people might think that what I'm saying is that this is different or odd or normal. No, everybody's body is perfect just the way it is. But if we talk about just the physical sex and we talk about breasts, men can grow breasts. It's called gynecomastia. And it can occur without their wanting it to occur. Men can lactate. Men can have very, very small penises that almost just resemble a large clitoris. Women can be born and grow up and basically not develop any breasts whatsoever and have an inability to lactate. Their clitoris can get extremely big. Women can grow chest hair and beards. Men can be born without or can become an adult without ever growing a beard. Think of Native Americans. They've got basically no body hair whatsoever. Men can have wide hips and women can have small hips. Men can have small shoulders, women can have broad shoulders. And all of these are phenotypical characteristics, right? And generally speaking, what we do is we see that there's a commonality, like a grouping that happens to fall in with people who have vaginas and a grouping that happens to fall in with people who have penises. The problem we have with society, the way that works, is that anything that doesn't fall in those two categories we think of as bad or wrong, something that needs fixing or correcting. And that's not the case. It's just that it's different. It's just different. There's nothing wrong with being different. It's just different. But again, that's all descriptive, right? That's just the way humans are, as opposed to ascribing any kind of norm, any kind of ideology, any kind of morality to it, which is what we're going to get into now.
Okay.
So let's talk about gender. So there are, generally speaking, three primary schools that deal with gender. And then there's one that I've recently become aware of that I think has some issues with, but is interesting. And I think we have to tell a story about how gender has gotten to where it is today. And to do that, we have to go back in time a little bit. And we have to talk about the patriarchy. And so for a very, very long time, gender was specifically and only thought of in terms of language. So there are gendered languages or sexed languages. And so Spanish is a primary example of this. So Spanish does not have she, he. They have Latin, and then they add an O or an A after it. So Latino, Latina, right? And so this is what, for the majority of human history, what was understood to be gender was just this linguistic thing. sexing language in order to apply the same term, to multiple things, or to provide a word, a characteristic. So if we sexed a verb male, then that meant, all the social stuff that goes along with being male. And if we sexed it female, all the stuff that goes along with that. So then in the 1960s, we get second wave feminism. And we get Kristen Crenshaw and we get Simone de Beauvoir. And second wave feminists don't like the idea of what is come to known as gender essentialism. And what gender essentialism is the idea that there are fixed, intrinsic, and innate qualities of humans that are the root of the observed differences between men and women. Now, when we talk about these differences, we think of this in forms of gendered terms. So, you can imagine your mother back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, or however far back you want to go, being told that being submissive is just something innate in women. Women are submissive. This is just what they are, right? And men are aggressive. That's just what men are. Women are gentle and emotional. Men are tough and logical. And these are just innate qualities of a person of their sex. And the second wave feminists said, no, because this is the reason that you're telling us we can't be leaders. We can't be CEOs, and we can't be business owners, and we can't be senators and congressmen. We can't be mayors and all these things, because you keep telling us about all these innate issues that we have that are preventing us from doing that. And so the second wave feminists fought against gender essentialism and created what was known as gender constructivism. And I'm sure everybody has heard gender is a social construct. This is kind of a mantra lately. So first of all, let's remember, let's just put a mark here and remember that women, specifically black women, are responsible for the movement away from gender essentialism, because we really want to give credit where credit's due, right? So we give credit there and we say that we're moving away from gender essentialism, right? Because really, it never made much sense to begin with, did it? Because we know that we just walk out, we see women who are powerful and aggressive and logical, and we see men who are emotional and nurturing and submissive, right? And again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the way you want to act. It's just different than the bimodal distribution that we have. So then we move on to constructivism. And constructivism holds for a while. And it says that gender is a social construct that deals with implicit and explicit achievements and is the motivation for the differences between men and women. So you can think of constructivism almost as taking on a role. So I'm sure that everybody at one point in time participated in a school play, and you were assigned the role of X, right? So I assume that Nick probably got assigned, Chicken Little when he was younger, and he probably was very proud of running around going, "The sky is falling, the sky is falling," right? And he took on that role. I can remember being in school plays and taking on certain roles. And so basically, you can construct a role and then put yourself into it, right? So you can say, what I mean by gender is this, right? And so you can say there's the like there's housewives, and then there's women CEOs, and there's male CEOs, and then there's all these things, right? All these things that would go in, and we can assign these terms a little bit more loosely. But basically what it boils down to is that there are roles that have been assigned to certain people. So nurturer has been assigned to woman because women give birth, and you can see where the connection to biology is there, right? Women are nurturers because women give birth and women breastfeed. And so men are providers, so men are leaders, and so we fill these roles, and these roles are just constructed. But if they're just constructed, that means that they can be deconstructed, right? And so by accepting that gender is a social construct, then we can say, okay, well, there's nothing wrong with a woman being a senator or a congressman or a CEO. And there's nothing wrong with a man raising a child and staying home, because it's all just constructed, right? The problem is that we don't like to deconstruct things. Once we've created this thing, we want it to just stay right there. And so when we tell people we don't like the way you built that, people get angry. People don't like to be told that they're wrong or that they should do something differently. And yet, constructivism doesn't get us all the way there. So one of second wave feminism's greatest products is a woman by the name of Judith Butler. And Judith Butler is a fantastic American philosopher, right out of the school of Peirce and Louis. Fantastic pragmatist, all around just amazing mind. And Judith Butler gives us something called performativity. Gender performativity is the reiterative power of discourse to produce the phenomena it regulates and constrains. So we can think of performativity in terms of the following analogy. Person X walks slow, and person Y walks fast. Society idolizes, for whatever reason, walking slow over walking fast. And so the act of idealizing the walking slow produces a social norm. And of course, now we have this performative notion where what we say is that we produce a series of effects as we act in a given environment. And those series of effects, through slow increments of time, will become either idolized or demonized by society in a given environment based on a variety of things, from the available food supply to the technological capacity of the society to the religious and cultural subcontexts of all of those things will go into determining which norms are idealized and which norms are demonized. And this is where I think gender actually finds its place. So I believe that gender is performative. And so what I think is that people act in a given way, and that over a period of time, based on the environment that Western society has grown up in, which is, authoritative, theocratic, patriarchal, and Puritan, what we have begun to idolize is for chasteness and virginity for women, and weaker, submissive, all these things for women, and of course for the men is aggressive and all these things, right? And so we now know when we say somebody's gender is X, what we're kind of talking about is that they are just kind of grouping all these idealized things, and they're saying this is what a male is, right? Or a man, right? And what it means to be a man is to do all these things, right? So I actually have, and I think I can bring this up so we can, let's see here. I don't know how well this is gonna work, but it might work okay with the little, the dot, the eyeball in there. Oh, look at you. Fantastic. Nick coming through.
Oh, I get. Well, there. Is this what you wanted? Or is that?
I want the gender terms. Do you have the gender
Uh,
terms? We'll say gendered
there
terms.
we go.
Awesome. So, dominant, active, tough, and logical. Masculine gender terms. Submissive, passive, gentle, and emotional or feminine. So, what society says when we talk about gender is we're generally talking about these things. Now, here's a caveat. We're not only talking about these things, but we're primarily talking about all these things. We're also talking about clothing styles. We're also talking about religion to a certain extent. We're talking about the way in which we have sex. We're talking about the way we act in public, right? All of those things kind of go in there, right? But when we look at these gendered terms, what do we see? Is I've only got two categories here: masculine and feminine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what society is trying to push us into. And that's where the performativity aspect comes in, right? Performativity dictates that society has determined that what it means to be masculine is to be these things. And what it means to be a man is to be masculine. And what it means to be masculine is to be a male, right? So that's how we walk this all the way back to sex, right? And the same thing applies to female. But if you look at these traits, every person watching this show right now knows women who are dominant and active and logical and aggressive and decisive and independent. And every person in this show knows men who are submissive and passive and gentle and loyal and reliant. And all of these terms, after a while, what you realize have absolutely nothing to do with masculinity or femininity at all, right? And so if we just pause for a moment, we replace masculine with type A and we replace feminine with type B, and we just think of them in terms of A and B, right? And we erase the idea of penis and vagina from our mind for a moment, then we can start to see we have guys that we know that fit in these categories and girls that we know. Or we could say that these are non-binary terms, and a combination of this on a spectrum is somewhere where you get to pick, right? You get to pick where you fall in. You get to pick the terms that apply to you. You get to pick the way you express yourself. You get to pick the way you identify. Now, I know I've thrown a lot of information out there. So when I was asked to do this show about 4 or 5 months ago, I was asked to respond to a specific critique. The critique was, gender seems to be an equivocation on what we mean by sex roles. And I thought about that for a very long time. And I, at first said, that makes a lot of sense. Because when we think about gender, we're just always thinking it in terms of sex for the most part. But when we go to the performativity aspect of gender, right, we understand that there's nothing about these things that is in any way, shape, or form connected to chromosomes or genetics or hormones or anything like that, right? It's connected to the way society perceives and idealizes the way in which they want people to behave. And that can't be an equivocation on sex, because that's an entirely normative issue. I'm going to pause here for a moment and answer any questions you have, Nick, see before I go on.
Well, I think I do think, and I remember your original answer. So originally this had been scheduled, to answer a criticism of Ozzy's, and actually, at least on that particular point, and again, you actually never spoke with Ozzy, so it was my representation of Ozzy's argument, and I want to get that crystal clear. But on that particular point, it had made a lot of sense to you. What I like about how you've laid this out is it in my view, sort of it dovetails sort of what I do think Ozzy's objection was, because I think it does fit in this schema, but with a much better understanding. And I'm going to get back to equivocation for a second, because you had mentioned the guy who comes up to you and says, well, there's only two sexes, and you're a boy or you're a girl, and that's it. No amount of wishing or anything is going to change that. And I will disagree with you on one minor point, although I think I understand what you were saying. I think he really does mean the narrowest view of biological sex, which I think was one of the possible constructs. But I think he objects for grounds that have nothing to do with that, because really none of those are social indicators or markers in the first place. So how he could object on that doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Sure.
But,
so if you think about it in terms of this, if a person is running around saying there's only two sexes, there's only two genders, and what they mean by that is just in the strictest sense of being able to make a baby, then that means all the war veterans that have gone overseas and had their penises blown off are no longer men or male. All the women who were born and all the men who have been born sterile for whatever reasons are no longer men and women or male or female, right? There's just a whole bunch of people out there that don't have sex, that don't have a sex because they can't make babies. And so that can't be what we mean when we talk about sex. Just like when we say men are aggressive, well, that can't be what we mean by the term man, because I know plenty of men who are not aggressive and who don't want to be aggressive. So that can't be. And then they'll say, okay, well, no, it's not just about making babies, right? It's about your chromosomes. Well, if we go to our handy dandy sex chart right here, it can't be about chromosomes, because you can be born with XY chromosomes and come out with a vagina and grow breasts and produce hormones, and the whole world will think of you as nothing but a woman, and you will live your entire life thinking you're nothing but a woman, and you will, just that's how you will live. But no, you're a male because of your chromosomes, right? Well, okay, so maybe there's something else, right? Well, maybe it's your genes. Well, no, it can't be your genes, because there are plenty of people where the SRY or the testes determining factor. And the point of all of this is when you try to reduce anything about something so broad as you as a mammalian species, and you try to reduce that to something essential, right? You're just asking to be wrong. Now, we can break things down to essentialism in logical proofs, right? P therefore Q, P therefore Q, right? That's about as far down as you can go, right? That's about as reduced as you can get. Basic modus ponens, right? But you can't do that with sex or hormones and things like that, because of all the stuff that goes into it. And then when you try to do it to gender, right? Well, so there's this new idea, right? That we get to kind of understand the world through our own identity, as opposed to any identity that society might want to foster on us, right? So I identify as a woman, and for a long time I've asked myself, what do I mean by that? I know what I know what it means to be cat, right? And I know what it means to what I think society means by woman, right? And I know that there's some categories on this gender term thing that I identify with. I identify with being nurturing and collaborative and submissive and loyal and reliant. But I also identify with being dominant and aggressive and analytical and competitive and decisive. So, if what I mean by woman is just a combination of these terms, then it seems that woman is strictly unique to me. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. Because what I mean by woman is going to be entirely different than what your wife means by woman, or different than what my wife means by woman, or any of the other women that are watching, right? And then there's the non-binary people. And by the way, there's this big umbrella, right? Non-binary people are basically saying many things. They could just merely be saying something as simple as, I don't think dresses are for girls. I think dresses are for people. They could be saying, I don't think blue is for boys. Blue is for people. Right? And so they're just not going to put up with any kind of arbitrary line of demarcation that says this thing is for boys and this thing is for girls. Right? It's going to be something as simple as that. Then it could be the idea that there are gender abolitionists which say this, all of this is nonsense. All of it's just nonsense. There never was any gender. And then there could be somebody like me who says, okay, well, I identify as a woman. What I mean by a woman is these things. And I also have this thing called dysphoria. And so what I'm also saying is that on top of identifying with these gender terms, I'm also identifying with the primary and secondary physical, phenotypical characteristics of the female sex. That's what my brain wants to see, right? And because my brain doesn't see it, my brain isn't happy. So I have had just wonderful opportunity with people in my life who have taken the time to help me transform my body into something that my brain likes to see. And along the way, they have educated me in these things. They've inspired me. They've inspired me to do all this so that I can better be an activist for people. Because it's not just about being an activist for the transgender community. It's about being an activist for you, Nick, and for the women that are watching this and all the other men. Because what it means to be a man should be what you mean it to be. And there shouldn't be anybody who ever comes to you and says, you know, men don't cry. Yes, they do. Men are emotional and submissive and passive and gentle and nurturing and verbal and collaborative, as well as being dominant and active and tough and logical and aggressive. Men are amazing creatures that we dump a lot of, you know, preconceived notions based off of puritanical nonsense from 2 centuries ago. And the same with women, right? I want to talk about yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'll add just as a quick aside. There's a theory going forward too as well that one of the reasons that men have such a higher heart attack rate and lower life expectancy compared to women is in fact because of men trying to one of the reasons I should say is because of men trying to unnaturally reach these ideals that really shouldn't be expected of any human being, and this idea that they cannot show any emotion, that they've got to bottle it all up, that they can't, that they always have to have the answer. The man always has the answer. So even when they know they don't have an answer, they feel pressured to have an answer, and they feel pressured to make one up if they can.
The suicide rate of Western men is so high. You know, one of the things that's just never talked about is how high the suicide rate is amongst men. It's ridiculously high, and it's primarily because of the things that we expect of men. We expect men to go off and fight wars and then come home and just pretend it was, you know, that they have no issues with blowing bodies up. We expect men to provide an income and not have any issue, you know, with working 60, 80 hours a week, and, you know, and then, you know, just the idea that, you know, men are supposed to do these things.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Nobody should be doing those things in the first place, right? But if we're going to require things, we ought to just, share the burden, so to speak. So basically, if we look at this all in a nutshell, well, you know what? I want to pause there for a moment. I want to talk about one more thing. And we're getting on about.
Tell me you want a slide. Tell me you want a slide. I've got the slides. I've got the slides.
Oh, you got the slides.
I don't think I got one of the ones that you had requested, but I do have. I mean, I
Well, actually, I
want to serve.
You can put the sex subsets back up there. Sex subsets 1. But I want to talk real quick about the fourth area of gender, or the fourth theory of gender that I've recently become aware of, and that I think has some issues, but is interesting, and it's the idea that gender is an emergent self-schema. Now, I'm sure that most people are aware of what a schema is. And a self-schema is basically taking what a schema is and applying it to thought. So a self-schema would be a long-lasting and stable set of memories that determines identity. So we can think of a person who understands what extroversion is. Extroversion becomes an important part of their identity. And so they say that they are an extrovert. The problem with this, I think, is it's basically what we would call self-ID. And I think, not to be too technical, but self-ID suffers from error theory, I think, because there's nothing predictive about the self-ID. Somebody telling me that they are this thing, but there's no reason for me to accept that they are that thing, because there's nothing that they're displaying about that thing to us. And because words are supposed to be performative, when someone says, I identify as an extrovert, and everything that they do says that they're an introvert, then the words kind of become meaningless. So I think an emergent self schema is an interesting idea, and it does seem to have some academic backing. So I do want to throw it out there, but I think it suffers from error theory. I think it just ends up being metaphysically queer.
Well, I think that's one objection to, and again, I think this is going to end up being equivocation. I think there's a lot of talking past each other when it comes to it. So I'm actually misusing equivocation, because equivocation isn't the same as talking past each other, and I've been using it that way. But nonetheless, there's I think a lot of objections that people have is they'll say, well, I actually wanted to ask one other question, and Maya had said, Maya had there's been a couple of great questions Maya had pointed out, though. I think when I'd asked about well, you do know that there's only two genders, and she said, this is when you do anything but try to mind your own business. But so I guess I'd have one question, which we don't have to get to right now, but which is, why are so many people interested in telling others what gender they can or cannot be? And then the other one, I do think that part of those arguments end up coming from a point of, well, you're just declaring that you're either male or female, and that's the same thing as me just declaring I am the king of Siam. And
sure. We have there's been a lot of work done into identity, right? Because identity is a fairly controversial aspect of philosophy and in psychology. But basically, we think that identity pretty much solidifies by the age of 4. Okay. And so what we're saying is, by the age of 4, you as an individual have made the determination based off of the performativity of the norms that you yourself see. You make a determination about where you want to fit in. And it's not something that you're probably aware that you're doing, and it probably won't manifest itself till many, many years later. But you have made the choices, and by the way, it is a choice to an extent. right? There is nothing that is purely nature, and there's nothing that's purely nurture, right? So there are some choices that you are making, right? But the choices are not conscious choices, generally speaking, right? They're subconscious choices based off of other things that you may not be aware of going on. So I can remember, just as an anecdotal bit, to give an example, when I was 4, all the kids on my block growing up wanted to be Ninja Turtles for Halloween. And so my mom just assumed that I wanted to be a Ninja Turtle too. And so she came home and she had the Ninja Turtle out. And I cried and I screamed and I said, no, I don't want to be a Ninja Turtle. And she said, well, what do you want to be? I said, I want to be She-Ra, Masters of the Universe. Right? And that's what I thought I was going to be when I grew up. I thought I was just going to grow up to be this person with this sword. And I stuck it in the air, and lightning would come down, and I would transform into this tall, powerful, blonde woman. Right? And I just knew that was going to be the case, and nobody could tell me otherwise. And I don't know why I thought that. I don't know the steps that conspired from the moment I was born to where I got to make me think that that's what I wanted to be. But I knew that's what I wanted to be. I just knew. And so when I got older, right, I started to, want to wear clothes that I associated with the physical attributes of women. And of course, my mom and dad would pitch a fit. Like, why are you doing this? Why? I don't know why I'm doing it. I just know it's what makes me happy. Right?
Yeah.
And so, of course, it's many, many years later that I finally get the terminology to come around on this. And so, yeah, I kind of lost my thought.
Well, I had asked about the also the people who self-identify and how does that. Well, I had asked. I was positing a common argument where the self identification is, well, I could identify as president of the United States, and I insist that everybody call me Your Highness Grand High Poobah, and
yeah, so that's generally something that's reserved for the transgender community, right? And of course, this conversation broadly as a whole applies to everybody, right? So we'll do about 10 minutes of questions, and then I think we could probably wrap this up. So yeah, you'll get the people to say, well, if you can identify as a woman, I can identify as a TAC helicopter. Well,
that's a new one, but okay, yeah.
So transgender people aren't claiming to be other species. Transgender people aren't claiming to be inanimate objects. And an important thing that most people don't seem to grasp is that transgender people are in no way, shape, or form confused about their sex. In fact, we are viscerally aware of our sex, more so than I think most people are. We are under no delusion about how we were born and what we look like and things like that. And so, when people say stuff like that, no, we're not confused. We know it's there. But why can't you identify as a dog? Well, because you don't have to get philosophical, you don't have background knowledge of what it would mean to identify as a dog. Okay. Mm-hmm. Which is required in order to identify as a thing. Now, somebody who says I identify as the president, that's a little bit trickier to combat because we do have background information about what it would mean to identify as president. But it also seems that term is kind of exclusionary, right? There can only be one president of the United States at any given time, and I'm pretty sure you're not Joe Biden. But look, if somebody came to me and says I identify as the president, okay,
that was
hey,
a little
Mr.
weird
President, how you doing? And so most of these things are just misunderstandings, misapplications of things, right? Because you're trying to pick and choose which part of the whole you're going to insult somebody with. So when a guy comes up to a woman and says, women are, don't you know that women, don't act like that, and you're not being ladylike, right? That's one I'm sure that all the women in the chat have heard before. You're not acting ladylike. I don't know what does it mean to act like a lady? We'll go back, right? Well, what it means to be a lady is to be curt and quiet and submissive and to cook and clean and take orders from men. And that's what it means to be ladylike, right? Well, no, I don't identify as that. so I'm not going to act ladylike. There was another question. What was the second one what was the second question?
Let's see. Well, I'd asked earlier, why are some people, and in my experience, it's usually males. I've seen some females, but it's usually males who are very bothered by the notion of trans in general, very concerned about who's using what restroom. And I've noticed some females too, but it's by an order of 5 to 1 seems to me to be the guys who really speak out, at least, and say something about this and have
I'm not
objections.
I'm not going to say that this is a universal rule, obviously, but generally speaking, I apply what I call the haggard razor. Now for the adults in the room, I'm sure we all know who Ted Haggard is. For those of you who don't know, Ted Haggard was an evangelical hate preacher who was caught in a motel with a male prostitute,
a very
high on methamphetamine, doing some rather aggressive sexual things to each other. And of course, this man railed against the LGBT community, right? And there seems to be a pattern. The more and more and more and more you yell about something, the more likely it is that you are trying to hide the fact that that's what you want to be doing. So I just automatically assume that the people that are yelling about transgender people are doing one of two things. Either they wish they could be transgender, or they want to have sex with transgender. One of those two. There is obviously the third category, that they're just completely, full of hate for anything that they perceive to be different. Then, there could be a variety of psychological reasons, but none of them are going to be rational, right? And most of it's just born out of fear, right? You've got the trope of the pedophile homosexual. Now you've got the trope of the pedophile transsexual, in the bathroom, da-da-da-da-da. And, I'm sorry. I've been using the women's lavatory for 12 years. And I don't know what people think goes on in these places, but, it's nothing other than, urinating and defecating and, things of that nature. So I don't think, we can, I don't want to give those people too much credit, right? They're just mean people who should not be paid attention to. And I really don't, it's just so much easier to be scared of things and understand things, right? It just really is. So that would be my answer to that. It's just easier to be mean to people. It's just easier to be scared of people. By the way, I just got a text message. Some people that were watching us, my surgeon from UNC, who's been doing all my surgeries and will be doing some more surgeries on me soon, watched the show, and she just wanted to let us know that we thought we did a fantastic job. So
I apologize to her for having to switch out the links. It's so rare we have to do that, and we probably haven't had to do that in about 6 or 7 months. I really hate it when that happens, but she was patient, so thank you. All right, you've been doing a spectacular job. This is great. I get to sit back and it's our air, and you're doing it.
So there's a comment in the chat that says, Vox, can you commit on slogans? LIKR. I don't know what that means.
It's comment on slogans like, I don't know, like real men drive Ram.
Yeah.
Let's not. And what I think when he means drive Ram, let's take that with a charitable interpretation of what he means by drive Ram. Let's not.
So I can say that if you don't drive Ram, you shouldn't be driving. Having said that, now that I've pissed off all the Ford and Chevy, and I think there's actually a toy truck called Toyota that some people seem to like, right? But my Dodge Ram will eat your Ford, Chevy, and Toyota, spit them out, right? There's actually there's a complete side note, but there's this funny meme going around. It says Ford F-150 electric engine, right? And here's comes Chevy saying, no, our electric engine, our Silverado's better, right? And all these people saying, we got to go green, we got to do this. And Dodge comes around and says, I'm gonna stick a Hemi 6.2 liter V8 into a minivan. What now? I love it. But anyway, no, in all seriousness, I hate things like that. Things like that really need to go away. First of all, they are a microaggression. And I know to all the progressives out there that might be watching this, please create a better term for that. Microaggression sounds so pedantic, right? We really do need a better word. But it is a microaggression. Real men. What does it mean to be a real man? What it means to be a real man is to be somebody who identifies as a man. That's what it means to be a real man. So if you're a Dodge Ram driver or you drive a minivan, you're a real man. If you have a penis or a vagina and you identify as a man, you're a real man, right? And in fact, it's just perpetuating toxicity amongst men. It really is. And women can't really do much about that, right? It's on men to change their slogans, on women to change our slogans. But yeah, that's what I would say about that. Is anytime you see something like that, and somebody comes up and says, real men drive Rams, real men work, real women cook. No, people work, people cook. And what it means to be a real person is just to be you. And I just honestly have no time for those people anymore. I really don't.
All
So
right,
that would be my comment on
that's
that.
good.
Yeah. So I will say that I will be in the Discord for a little bit. But the opportunity to do this has inspired me to go back to school. And so I have recently enrolled and I'm taking courses, and I actually have decided to pursue a graduate degree in gender studies, all thanks to Nick and In Time. And so I want to personally say thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for putting this idea in my head. It has done wonders for me. It has inspired me to go back to school. It has inspired me to broaden my horizon, to become a better activist. And so I really want to personally say thank you very much for having me and allowing me to do this. And I do really hope that this taught you guys something, answered questions that you may have had, and please, all of this stuff, all of the information that I provided, I can go into much greater detail about. If there's any questions, please DM me on the Discord, send me an email, get up with Nick, if you need my contact information or something like that. Anything that I can do to broaden this, and any questions I'm always available to answer questions. I think that one of the most important things we can as a society to do moving forward is dispel the myths of all these the toxicity that revolves around gender and everything like that. And I really want to live, I would much prefer to live in a society where what it means to be a man is to be whatever you say it is. Whatever you mean by that, and what it means to be a woman And so, I hope to see a future in where girls are, encouraged to work in fields that, generally speaking, have been said, these aren't fields for women. STEM, math and engineering and the sciences. I really hope that men think that it's perfectly okay if you want to be a stay-at-home dad. It's perfectly okay if your wife is the breadwinner. It's perfectly okay if you want to be a nurse or a secretary. That's the world that I want to grow up in. That's the world that I want my children to grow up in. So please reach out. And again, thank you so much. Really, it's been really an honor to work with you, Nick, and to put all this together.
Well, thank you. And so I'll give a brief reply. I love doing this show. I desperately love doing it. With starting late and all, and we have a great audience, which I really appreciate, and who supports the show. People on the Discord who are active. But the show is a lot of people, and it's a lot of people with a lot of ideas floating around. And that the idea to do this show, I had heard Ozzy talking about it, and I wanted to do it, and I tried to bring him on, but there was a lot of people involved. It certainly wasn't just me, and there's always a lot of people involved. It's never just me. I'm the most public and obvious face of it, and I sort of make the final decisions. But it's absolutely never just me. And I hope anybody who's ever worked here, for the most part, and anyone who is working here will say that. So, this show also came about through a lot of discussions with a few other people. Titan, who's in our Discord, participated heavily, especially early on, and we did a lot of. But it's I do this show to try to educate people, to platform ideas, and to talk about things that the reason it's called In Time. It's what's going on today, what's going on in our society. Sometimes it's news and politics, and sometimes it's culture. Sometimes it's in time. So and as we've been waiting for this show, you've been just a stellar and a regular on especially Overtime, which has been a delight to do with you. So I would like to also thank you very much as well, because it's been a pleasure having you contribute. And I think I'm always listening to what the audience is saying and who likes what and how things are going on, and people have certainly very much enjoyed your appearances on the show, and again, especially Overtime, where you quite clearly bring your own. So it's right back at you. It's been a pleasure here as well, and I sincerely appreciate it. And I wish you the best of luck going forward, and anything else I can do to support it. And this video is for the most part all of our videos to that people can take clips out of and do things with, as long as it's educational in nature. And certainly this one, if you want to pass on or share with anyone, is they're more than welcome to do. And God bless. So in the meantime, was there anything else? It sounded like that was a wrap up. So if there's not much else, I will probably be joining later in the Discord. This is the time I go put the kids to bed and try to get a few other things done. And then,
we do have a super chat from my Sandring here. Says $20 super chat. This was an interesting show. Thank you for the effort, research, and introspection you put into the presentation, Vox. And thank you, Sandring. You are absolutely welcome.
Thank you. I missed out. I'd switched off the screen, so that would have been bad. All right. Well, Xandering, a long time supporter of the show, and I've been on a few times too, and it's always a pleasure having him on as well as Xandering. Thank you very much. We'll get that call-in number again so you can call without having to type. But we are going to be on the Discord. The Discord, I've been getting notifications. People have been joining and want to come in and chat about it. So I think you're going to have your hands full there,
Awesome.
Vox. And I will definitely be in a little bit. Until then, thank you all for joining us, and I look forward to catching up with you guys soon. Have a good evening.